Welcome back, and today I'm going to tell you why the S9 leak featured here is extremely disappointing and what Samsung should do and can do in order to compete with Apple and eventually beat Apple on Techno Eclipse. And don't forget to check us out at technoeclipse.com. I'm Scott, and I'll see you after the intro. Samsung has never actually made anything that was more than just an iterative update. If you look back at they came out with the S6 Edge or the Note Edge, and then the S6 Edge Plus. They came out with all these phones with that curved display, and then they came out with the S7 Edge, and then they came out with the Note 7, which had, again, another curved display. And then the next year, we just saw them shrink the top and bottom bezels. That's essentially all they did on the S8, S8 Plus, and then eventually the Note 8 when that came out. So they really never make a huge splash. It just seems like they make a huge splash. But if you pay attention to all their phones, like the difference between the S6 and the S7 Edge was huge, obviously, because those are two different phones. But if you just look at like the Note Edge, and then if you look at the Note 5, that iteration between the Note and then the Edge and then the S7 Edge was actually a smaller update. So they never really make a big splash, but I was hoping that the S9 update was going to actually be pretty impressive. I was hoping they were going to have an under-the-screen fingerprint reader, and it's just super disappointing because it looks like all they did was just add a fingerprint scanner underneath the camera, and then if you get the S8 Plus, you'll probably get a dual camera setup similar to what Apple does. I actually like that. Like, you pay a little bit more, you don't just get a bigger screen, you actually get more features. And then with the S9, it'll just be a solid phone for like the everyday person. But if someone wants to pay $100, $200 more, they can get those added benefits of that phone. It's a shame that Samsung couldn't remove more bezels. It looks like it's just going to be an S9 with the back of the phone a little bit changed, and it'll have a Qualcomm Snapdragon 845. It'll probably come with a little bit more RAM, and it might come with different storage options. Although last year I believe they came with the base model of 64, which is really solid, so I can't imagine they increase that to 128. So it's a little bit disappointing to see that, but I kind of expected it to a point. I was hoping Samsung, basically the display king, would push it a little bit further and totally eliminate all the bezels and have a phone without any bezels on it. It would just be a sheet of glass, a sheet of screen. We couldn't possibly see that with the Note 9. I obviously have no idea. I'm not working with Samsung or anything, so these are all guesses. But it would have been nice to see them push the envelope a little bit further and see what they could do a little bit further after they released the Note 8, which is typically their Note lineup. Used to be the experimental lineup with the crazy batteries, the IR blasters. They had they had those on the older phones, but they had the huge screen on the Note 8 or on the Note like 3 and 4 and 2 when those came out, and they had the pen and the stylus, and those were like crazy things to see on a phone because that's not what anybody else was doing. Going all the way back from quarter 1 of 2015, which is the first 3 months of 2015. So January, February, March. That's quarter 1. Going back from then, Samsung has shipped the most phones worldwide by a large margin, by almost double what Apple does. In the US, it's different. Apple reigns supreme, but worldwide speaking, Samsung is the king of the smartphone. To this day, even into the last quarter, the quarter before that, they are the king of smartphones. So they have the most smartphones sold, but they're using Google's operating system, Android. And everybody knows that. It's not a big secret. But what I think Samsung should be doing is creating their own operating system. And I'll explain why. And the reasons are very simple. They would make more money after the R&D for the operating system. They know what people like. They've seen 2 operating systems. We've seen 3. We've seen the Windows version, which failed. So they know what people don't like. And we've seen iOS and Android. So we've seen the 2 that people go to. It's either iOS or Android. So I think they should be taking both. They should be taking features from both. So from iOS and macOS and watchOS, they should take the continuity between all of those and build their own operating system, not just their own watch system, which I think is Tizen OS. They need to create their own phone operating system, which works seamlessly with their watches. And then they make tablets, and they also make computers, if you see where I'm going here. They should be able to manufacture products that don't just run other people's operating systems. Samsung is big enough right now where if they put a bunch of money into it, it would cost them a lot of money, and it would be a pretty big risk. But if they did it correctly, and all they had to do would be a pretty decent job, because people love their phones. They love Android phones. If they can get developers making apps for them early, and you get the big ones on, then you know it's going to be successful. That's probably one of the biggest hurdles to leap, is getting people to develop apps for the new operating system. But if they could make a new operating system on their phones, and then that same operating system to run on tablets, and then a different operating system to run on computers, then you would be talking about a total Apple competitor who sells more phones than Apple does. You're looking at potentially being able to take over the entire marketplace, all the way from phones to watches to tablets to computers, the way Apple has done, not taken over, but the way Apple has gotten people into their ecosystem and made it really hard for them to leave. If you just did something similar to that, keep some of Android's good features, keep the customization, keep the fact that you can buy an Android phone for $200, for $300, for $100. So start talking to other developers and be like, okay, you can use our operating system, so you make money off of that. And then you can use their operating system, but then you just charge them a premium for it, and then they put it on their phone, and then their phone runs the new Samsung operating system. I think this would be so exciting to see somebody else try to compete with Apple and Google in this space. And the only company that really could do it right now is Samsung. There are probably a bunch of other companies that are small that could do it, because like the starting cost would be not that big for a small company, because they're not risking a lot, so they don't have a lot of phones. So they would lose money if it didn't work. But Samsung could lose their entire company, their stock would just dip. They sell appliances and their stuff, but they make the most money on smartphones and gadgets and wearable tech and stuff like that. So if they could develop their own operating system that harnessed all the good features of iOS, the continuity that everyone talks about, and if they could take features from Android, being able to customize it, but being able to keep it relatively consistent, so people know what they're getting when they get a Samsung phone. Like, you get when you get an Android phone, you know what you get when you get an iOS device. So if they, with the Sam OS, that's the new name of it, with Sam OS, they could develop an entirely different operating system that's very similar to both of those, but just takes the great parts of iOS, takes the great parts of Android, and puts them together. And they have the market share to try something like that. It would be risky. Maybe they could start off with their Note lineup, which used to be the risky one. Instead of turning that into like just a premium device, they should turn that into Sam OS. Put their operating system on Note and see what happens. See what people start to do. See if people start to buy it or they don't buy it. And if they don't buy it, it's not a big deal. That's your test phone. Or come out with a completely different phone. That's what they could do. Something like that. And I think that's the next step for Samsung, because they can only grow so much. They can only make money on hardware right now. They can't make money on software. They can't make money on people buying their apps, because no one uses the Samsung App Store on their phones. They all go to Google Play. That's what everyone uses. So it looks like they're trying to, develop software to make money on. But I think the next logical step would be to develop a computer operating system, a tablet operating system, and over 2 mobile operating systems, like a tablet one and like a phone one, because they already have the watch one. So if they could just expand on that, they could really make great products that have the continuity, but also the great features everyone loves about Windows and Android devices. So the upgradability, make Android available, or not Android, make Samsung OS for computers available on every device. But it needs to be, maybe if you just locked it down a little bit, like Apple does with, you can only get iOS on certain devices, but if you were to, or you could only get macOS on certain devices, but if you were to, maybe they could have a guideline for Samsung, or Samsung's, macOS variant, so their computer variant, if they could only use a certain type of motherboard, a certain type of CPU, RAM, and graphics card, but have it be expanded. Like, so if you talk to these companies, that's like, oh, it's SamOS compliant, or this is not SamOS compliant, whatever they decide to name it. So like Intel would develop chips, or it would really basically just be Samsung saying, okay, we want them to run on the Ryzen operating system or on Ryzen chips and Intel. That's what we want our operating system to run on. That is the next step for Samsung. If they could take that step, it'd be awesome. Probably won't. It's too much risk, but I don't know, who am I? I'm just, it's a small YouTuber. But I think that would be really cool to see another company try to compete with Apple and, with Google. But the company that already dominates the hardware side of everything. So everything Samsung makes could revolve around that hardware aspect that they dominate, but then implement their own software. They have fridges that they could implement their software on, where text messages show up. You could write notes on it that show up on there, that pop up on your phone. I don't know if that already works, but it would be much more seamless. Instead of having to download apps and allowing permissions, it would just work because it's Samsung's base system on all of those, which would make it much more seamless. If you like this video, hit the like button. Tell me what you think about Samsung making their own operating system. Would this work? Would it be too expensive? Would it be too risky? I would just like to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you like the video, hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. I'm trying to put out more videos, try to get more people to see them. I think I'm doing some decent content. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Check out my website, technoeclipse.com. That'll be linked in the description. And I'll see you in the next one.